Hi, T2W here, and on this review video, we're going to be taking a look at the difference between a 15 and a 16 tooth front sprocket on the KLR 650. Stick around, we'll get started right after this. Okay, so in a previous video, showed you how to change the drive chain and sprocket on KLR 650. A common maintenance item that you have to do from time to time. So during that time, I also changed my front sprocket from the stock 15 tooth configuration to a 16 tooth configuration. So this video is going to focus on that 15/16 tooth comparison and how it affects the performance of the bike. So here is the 16 tooth front sprocket, and as the name implies, it has 16 teeth in here for the chain. So that's one tooth larger than a 15 tooth sprocket, obviously. So you may think, well, why would I bother just going up one tooth on the front sprocket? Well, here's why. The standard configuration on a KLR 650 is a 15 tooth front and a 43 tooth rear sprocket. So it stands to reason that if you change the teeth on the sprockets, the size of the sprockets, you're going to change the gearing on the bike and the overall performance. Now you can go, instead of going up one tooth on the front, you can go down on the back. To have the equivalent performance of one tooth on the front, you've got to change something like 3 or 4 teeth on the rear. So you may have to go down to, say, a 40 tooth sprocket on the rear to get close to what one tooth on the front would perform. So with the 15 tooth front and the 43 tooth rear, which is stock on the KLR, you're going to get okay performance all around, which is what the engineers at Kawasaki wanted to get out of the bike. So you get good low end torque where you're able to lug around in first or second gear, off-road in dirt, mud, climbing hills, etc. And it's going to perform well. And it's going to perform okay on the road. So when you get out on the road, if you want to get up to highway speeds on a stock KLR, you're typically going to see that you're going to need to get up to about 5,000 RPM to achieve 70 miles an hour. So if you want to cruise on the highway, that's what you're looking at. And that doesn't sound too bad, but at 5,000 RPM on a KLR, for long periods of time, it's just pretty buzzy and gets a little uncomfortable. So by going up one tooth on the front to a 16 tooth sprocket, it allows us to gain roughly around 500 RPM difference and achieve the same speed. So quickly, I'm going to recap the installation process for 15/16 tooth. If you want to see the full video for the chain and both sprockets, you can take a look at the link here in the tiles to that video. So I'm going to show you a short clip of how to replace this. And then I want to show you some actual ride performance videos showing before and after with the 15 tooth and then after with the 16 tooth to let you see what the performance difference is. So I've seen quite a few videos out there talking about the 15 and 16 tooth sprocket. Again, it's a hot topic amongst KLR owners, but I've not really seen anyone show you what the difference is. So in typical Tim Two Wheels fashion, I'm going to get into the detail. I'm going to show you a close-up of the tach and the speedometer and at the different gears and how it's performing with 15, and then again how it's performing with the 16 tooth on there. So let you see for yourself what difference it makes and whether it's worth it or not for you to make this change. So enough talk. I'm going to show you the footage from the shop and the installation of the 16 tooth, and then we're going to go for a ride and show you that. So to get started here on the chain and sprocket removal, first of all, I have the bike up on a jack stand here, up on a motorcycle stand, so I can move it around. The first thing that we want to do is to remove the covers. The front sprocket cover here is removed by 3 10mm bolts. There's one at the top and 2 in the bottom down here. So now we can work this off. It should come off nice and easy. And that's all there is to it. Good time to clean this crud out of here too if you want. Okay, now that we have the front sprocket cover off of the bike, you can see the nut and the sprocket back here and the chain where it goes around. This is your main drive sprocket or your front drive sprocket. The way, in order to remove this nut, there's a few little tricks. First of all, if you rotate it around, you'll see at some point, like here, the washer is bent over. Now, this nut has been changed before with the previous owner. Actually, this washer should be bent over one of the flats of the nut as a locking mechanism. In some cases, you'll see where it's bent over twice, one on opposite sides. So what we want to do is to take, ideally, you'll want to take a punch like I have here and drive it back, and then just take a hammer and flatten that back out. Now, I have seen people use screwdrivers or whatever they have available. From a safety perspective, you're not supposed to hammer and use a screwdriver like a chisel. I know a lot of people do, but it could shatter. So wear some eye protection, and then we just want to hammer this back. It's a pretty soft washer, so it doesn't take a lot. So what I'm going to do is basically just tap it back out of the way in a few spots here, and just get that washer somewhat flat there. Now for the next step, this is a 27 millimeter nut, so you want to use a 27 millimeter socket to fit that. Now obviously with the bike in neutral, especially since I have it up off the ground, when we try to turn this, it is going to turn. Many of the videos you'll see people using a long breaker bar or a really long ratchet like this one, put on here, get on the bike, put their foot on the brake, have it in gear, and struggle to break that loose. The ideal way, if you have one, is to use an impact wrench. If you have an impact wrench available, I suggest that's the best way to do it, the easiest way. I realize not everyone will have an impact wrench. It doesn't matter whether it's electric or air, pneumatic, like I have here, but as you'll see, it makes it a lot easier. I have a clamp on the rear brake, and I'll show you a picture here. Makes it nice and easy to hold it because I have the bike up off the ground. So what we're going to do is just get this started on here, and that easy, it's off. As you'll see, it's a lot easier to do it this way than, again, trying to use a ratchet or a breaker bar because this nut is torqued on here. So now we have our standard OEM nut off of here. So let's go ahead and get the washer. And as you'll see, the washer has been bent up a little bit because of previous uses. I'm going to go ahead and flatten this out a little bit better. Then next we want to go ahead and loosen our chain and get the chain off the sprocket, and then remove this front sprocket here. Okay, so now that we have our chain removed, it's going to be a piece of cake. This front sprocket will just slide straight off. All right, so to install the 16-tooth front sprocket, you'll notice the two sides are different. The side with the thicker lug on it and the 16, and of course this is a primary drive, so it's got their logo stamped in here. That's going to go to the outside. Doesn't matter how you put it on there. These threads here are for pulling it. If you ever get it stuck, you can run bolts in here and it'll help you push it away or pull it away from off the shaft. So again, it doesn't really matter how that goes on. So let's just get that on there. So to put this back on, I have put my washer, actually I used a vise to clamp it and to get it as flatter than it was. It's still not perfect, but it doesn't have to be. So what you can do is just put this back on, and the washer has these teeth in it. So and what the teeth are designed for is to fit just up on the edge of this sprocket here. I'm sorry, on the shaft. When the sprocket is on, there's just a little bit of the teeth of the shaft that are still exposed. So we take our washer, put that up on there, and that's to really act as a locking mechanism so that when it's on there, it does not spin, which is why you're able to use it to bend over and lock the nut into place. Next is the prevailing torque nut. So we just simply spin that on. Now, I've got the bike in gear, and I'm just going to use a ratchet to snug this up. Okay, we have everything back together. Our chain tension is set properly, and wheel alignment is set. The last thing that we need to do now is to torque the prevailing torque nut to 72 foot-pounds per Eagle Mike's specifications, and then put the front cover back on. So with our torque wrench still set to 72 foot-pounds, let's apply some pressure. And there. It is now torqued properly to 72 foot-pounds, and then we will reinstall our front cover, and then that's all there is to it. Okay, so you saw on the comparison the before and after of the 16 tooth. Did it make a huge difference? No, it didn't. Did it make enough to make the bike a little more comfortable to ride at highway speeds? Yes, I think it did. I'm happy I changed it. You know, you see the comparison. It really was only about, 5 mile an hour and like fourth and fifth gear difference that you gained at the same RPM. Or you can look at it as you saved 500 RPM to achieve the same speed. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, and it isn't, but again, at highway speeds on a KLR, it is less buzzy. I was able to cruise more comfortably at say 55, 65, and even 70, but it felt more comfortable than it really portrays in the video. So I'm happy with it. I was still, one thing I didn't get on video is I did go on some back roads, some gravel roads, dirt roads, and lug around in first gear, just as I would in an off-road trail. And it still had plenty of low-end torque. I was able to hit it and have plenty of torque to pull out to get back up to speed if I needed to. Anyway, I'll leave this up to you. You see the facts, you see what it takes to change it, you see the differences that it made, and you decide whether you feel that it's worth it for you or not. Anyway, Tim 2 Wheels, that's how I did it. Thanks for watching.